How an orphan with no money or connections founded the world's most famous watch brand. A large part of Rolex's history is covered in secrecy and mystery, but today we will delve into the depths of Rolex's incredible wealth story, and most importantly, we will learn why Rolex is so expensive. The Rolex story begins with Hans Wilsdorf, the company's innovative and mysterious founder. Hans was born in Germany in 1881 as the second child of Anna and Jean. His childhood was full of love and happiness, but it was cut short by tragedy. When he was 12, both his mother and father unexpectedly passed away, just months apart. When his uncle sent him to boarding school, Hans was very disheartened by the hardships he experienced, but after a while, he decided to escape this situation by focusing on his schoolwork. He especially enjoyed learning different languages, which opened a way for him to move abroad after school. He started working in Switzerland at a company called Kuno Korten, a major exporter of various pocket watches. Speaking German, English, and French, Hans worked as a clerk and correspondent at the firm, since the company also produced its own watches. This role gave Hans the opportunity to understand watchmaking and examine the watchmaking industry closely. Although it involved repetitive tasks, such as winding hundreds of watches every day, Hans developed a deep appreciation for the craft during this time and became obsessed with the idea of creating perfect watches. Later, in 1903, Hans moved to London to work for another company, where he had a bigger role, such as finding new sales and customers. This allowed him to understand what differentiated one watch brand from another and how important marketing was for a brand's success. Although these different jobs were quite enjoyable, Hans had much bigger dreams and the desire to apply the skills he had learned for himself. In 1905, at the age of 24, Hans decided to found his own watch company. He had a small amount of money saved to invest in the business, but most of the funds came from his partner-to-be, his brother-in-law Alfred Davis. Together, they founded the company Wilsdorf and Davis and began importing watches from Switzerland to sell in the United Kingdom. However, wristwatches were not as popular then as they are today and were mostly seen as women's jewelry. Hans's friends even told him that a watch with a small and delicate mechanism would be fragile and easily broken, and that such a small watch could not show accurate time. Pocket watches were much preferred. But Hans said, "In my personal opinion, pocket watches will almost completely disappear and wristwatches will definitely take their place." Hans just thought they needed to be high quality. So Hans ignored all the criticism and took all the company's money to place one of the largest wristwatch orders to date. He believed that wristwatches would dominate in the future. Everyone thought he was crazy. Even his partner was not very enthusiastic about the idea. But Hans did not give up and tried to learn at least one new piece of information from each of people known as the best watchmakers. Using an old connection from his time working in Switzerland, he imported Swiss-made mechanisms to start producing high-quality wristwatches. Of course, Hans knew that quality alone would not be enough, and that brand awareness would be the most important element. Everything depended on having a catchy name. The story of the name Rolex is a bit interesting. Although Hans claims to have generated hundreds of names by trying every possible letter combination, he could not find a name he liked. One day, while scribbling at work, he found something interesting. According to Hans, a genie whispered the name Rolex to him. Whatever the real source of the story, the name was perfect. Rolex was short, memorable, and easy to pronounce in every language. Also, the name Rolex carried both a stylish and authoritative air. For this reason, Hans started printing this name on the dials of all his watches, which helped increase brand awareness. In fact, a few years later, they changed the entire company name to Rolex Limited. The new Rolex watches began selling quickly. In 1910, Rolex became the first wristwatch to receive a certificate of precision. Then, in 1914, the British Kew Observatory gave a Rolex watch an A-class rating, which this type of watch had never received before. Rolex was starting to be associated with quality, which helped them achieve more sales. However, World War I broke out in 1914. At that time, there were more than 60 employees at the Rolex headquarters in London. It had become an export center to all the markets it sold to. But during the war, Germany became an enemy of England. Tensions began to rise because Hans was of German descent and had a German name and accent. But that was not all the problem. The British government imposed a 33% tax on all luxury goods during wartime. To avoid any problems and to benefit from serious tax advantages, Hans decided to move the Rolex headquarters to Switzerland, which remained neutral throughout the war. While many watch companies went bankrupt during World War I, the wartime period was quite successful for Rolex. Thanks to the reliability and convenience of wristwatches compared to pocket watches, they became a favorite among soldiers. Undoubtedly, the secret behind Rolex's rapid growth was Hans's marketing genius. Even in the 1920s, Hans provided his watches for the use of explorers, athletes, racers, pilots, and countless other successful people. This established a connection between high achievement and Rolex in the minds of consumers. Furthermore, Hans broadcast hundreds of cleverly crafted advertisements on radio and in newspapers, realizing the value of product placement much earlier than most of his competitors could understand. The continuation of these clever moves came in 1926. Rolex produced the world's first commercially sold, completely waterproof watch. Hans would again work wonders in marketing. He heard about a woman planning to swim across the English Channel and persuaded her to cross the channel wearing Rolex's new waterproof watch. This made the durability of the Oyster model known to the whole world. After spending more than 10 hours in the cold water, the Rolex Oyster came out of the water completely intact. This event created many headlines about Rolex's new product. Hans then told Rolex dealers to display the waterproof Oyster watches in their shop windows inside a fish tank where real fish swam around the watch. This inevitably attracted the attention of passers-by. The next major milestone in Rolex history came just 5 years later. Rolex engineers developed a perpetual rotor, which automatically wound the watch. Hans also made it a mission to ensure that the world's most famous names, especially those who undertook daring challenges, wore a Rolex. The crew on the first flights over Everest wore the Rolex Oyster. Similarly, Malcolm Campbell wore a Rolex watch when he broke the land speed record in 1935. Thanks to the combination of this excellent marketing strategy and innovative inventions, Rolex continued to grow and popularize rapidly. In 1945, the company's 40th anniversary, Rolex revolutionized the watch world with another innovation. It launched the Datejust model, the world's first automatic watch with a date window on the dial. However, shortly before this announcement ceremony, Hans experienced another tragedy in his life. His beloved wife, Florence, died due to an illness. Florence had always been by his side during difficult times, and this loss was a devastating period for Hans. He had been orphaned at the age of 12, and now, at 63, he was left as a childless widower. Hans, the master of watches, was not the master of time. He began to think more about his own death. Therefore, he spent the next few years creating a plan to keep the future of the empire he had built from scratch in trustworthy hands. That is why, in 1946, Hans founded the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation and transferred all his shares in Rolex, meaning 100% ownership of the company, to this foundation. Even today, this organization holds all the ownership and control of Rolex. Since it is a foundation and not a company, it is not subject to corporate tax on the profits earned. Instead, a large portion of the money is channeled into charity, such as educational scholarships and training watchmakers. However, the money channeled into charity is not reported. Because Rolex is managed by a foundation, it has no shares and is not required to disclose its financial activities. This structure allows Rolex to maintain a very high level of secrecy. Consequently, despite being one of the world's most recognized watch brands, very little is known about the company's internal affairs. These internal affairs cover topics such as how the company is managed, who manages it, how much money it makes, and what they do with that money. Therefore, some may say that the foundation is simply a clever way to protect the wealth and power of Rolex and its subsidiaries. Rolex employees also have strict confidentiality agreements. Photography is not even allowed inside the Rolex building. Thus, Rolex operates in the shadows. As far as we know, when Hans passed away in 1960, the new owners of Rolex continued to strengthen the company. However, in the 1970s, a major challenge arose with the introduction of battery-powered quartz watches, which were more accurate, easier, and cheaper to produce. As these quartz watches flooded the market, many mechanical watch manufacturers went bankrupt. The number of people working in the Swiss watch industry dropped from 90,000 to 28,000. Despite this, Rolex managed to survive. In 2017, a Daytona Rolex belonging to the late Hollywood star Paul Newman broke records at auction, selling for an astounding $17.7 million. Of course, you don't need to pay such a high price for a Rolex, but even the entry-level models are worth thousands of dollars. So, why are people willing to spend so much money on a Rolex when we already have watches on our smartphones? When you search for this question on Google, the answer seems quite simple. It is said that Rolex is so well made that it will stand the test of time. This is a nice feeling, but the truth is not that simple. You don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars for a long-lasting watch. To be clear, a Rolex is not just a watch, it is also a status symbol. In fact, countless iconic figures, from rappers on the streets of New York to members of the British royal family, have worn a Rolex, indicating that the brand has become a nearly universal symbol of wealth. This level of status has been earned thanks to a high-visibility marketing strategy through which Rolex successfully associated itself with success. For example, Rolex is the official timekeeper for both Wimbledon and Formula One. They sponsor many prestigious events like horse riding and golf championships that the wealthy watch or participate in. Thanks to these marketing and sales strategies, the brand has become one of the most valuable brands in the world. What Hans achieved, despite the great difficulties he faced from an early age, is truly incredible. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more stories like this.